The wind whipped across the barren Montana plains, carrying with it the dust of countless forgotten storms. It stung the eyes and chilled the bone, a constant reminder of nature's unforgiving power. Beneath this vast indifferent sky, a creature of quiet desperation was slowly fading. His name was Maverick, and his story was etched in the hollows of his ribs and the haunted depths of his eyes. He was a horse, once proud and strong, now a shadow of his former self, broken by the cruelty he had endured. Maverick stood in the corner of his pen, a desolate figure against the rough-hewn wood. He didn't move. He didn't even twitch an ear. The hay, piled high and sweet-smelling, lay untouched. Food was a forgotten comfort, a luxury he no longer deserved, or perhaps a luxury his broken spirit simply refused. Every fibre of his being screamed a silent protest against the world that had betrayed him. His ribs were stark lines beneath his dull coat, each one a testament to days, then weeks, of starvation. He was a prisoner, not of fences, but of his own memories, a captive to the echoes of pain. His past was a blur of harsh hands and sharp words, of fear that had become his constant companion. He remembered the brutal force, the kicks, the whips, the indignity of being treated as less than an animal. These memories clung to him like burrs, refusing to let go. They had stripped away his trust, his spirit, and now his will to live. He was adrift, a ship without a sail, lost in a sea of despair. The rancher who now owned him, a weathered man named Jedediah, watched him with a heavy heart. Jedediah had seen many horses come and go, but Maverick was different. There was a profound sadness in the horse's stillness, a grief that went beyond mere physical suffering. It was a soul that had been deeply wounded, and Jedediah wasn't sure if it could ever heal. Jedediah was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of a life spent under the open sky, etched with the wisdom and weariness of 70 years. His hands, gnarled and strong, had broken wild horses and gentled the most stubborn. But Maverick was a puzzle that Jedediah couldn't solve. He'd tried everything a man of his experience could think of. Gentle words, patient waiting, the finest hay, the sweetest oats. Nothing worked. Maverick just stood there, a monument to his own suffering, slowly starving himself into oblivion. The vet had shaken his head, his prognosis grim. "He's given up, Jedediah," he'd said, his voice soft with pity. "Some wounds go too deep." Jedediah would stand by the fence, day after day, just watching. He'd talk to Maverick, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. "Come on, boy," he'd murmur. "You gotta eat, gotta keep going." But Maverick's eyes, when they bothered to open, held no spark, no recognition, only a vast, empty void. Jedediah felt a kinship with the horse, a shared sense of loss that hung heavy in the air between them. Just a few months ago, Jedediah had lost his wife, Sarah. She had been the light of his life, the vibrant heart of their small ranch. Her absence was a gaping hole, a silence that echoed louder than any storm. Sarah loved music, loved life, loved animals. She had a way of bringing out the best in everything, even a stubborn old rancher like Jedediah. He remembered Sarah's laughter, a sound as clear and bright as a mountain stream. He remembered the way she'd hummed while she gardened, the way her eyes would crinkle when she smiled. And he remembered her songs. Sarah had a beautiful voice, and she'd often sing while she worked, or just to fill the quiet moments. Her favorite was an old folk ballad, a simple tune about love and loss and enduring hope. Jedediah hadn't heard it since she had been gone. The silence in the house was deafening, and the silence in his own heart felt just as profound. He often found himself wandering through their home, touching her things, trying to recapture a sliver of her presence. He'd even found her old guitar, tucked away in the corner of the attic, still bearing the faint scent of her perfume. One afternoon, the despair felt particularly heavy. Jedediah sat on the porch swing, the wood groaning under his weight. He watched Maverick, a still silhouette in the fading sunlight. The horse looked weaker than ever. Jedediah's gaze drifted to Sarah's guitar, leaning against the wall. An idea, fragile and perhaps foolish, began to form. He hadn't played in years, not since Sarah had passed. The music had felt like a betrayal, a reminder of what he had lost. But now it felt like the only thing he had left. He walked over, his movements stiff, and picked up the guitar. The wood was smooth beneath his calloused fingers. He sat down, the guitar resting on his lap, and began to strum. His fingers were clumsy at first, the notes a little shaky. He hadn't forgotten the chords, not entirely, but the melody felt distant, buried under layers of grief. He began to sing, his voice rough and untrained, a stark contrast to Sarah's sweet soprano. He sang the old folk ballad, the one Sarah had loved. The words felt foreign on his tongue at first, ghosts of a happier time. But as he continued, the familiar tune began to loosen something deep inside him. He sang about hardship, about love that endures, about finding light in the darkest of places. He sang it for Sarah, for himself, and for the dying horse in the pen. He sang with all the emotion he could muster, pouring his loneliness, his grief, and his faint flicker of hope into the simple melody. He didn't expect anything, certainly not a reaction from Maverick. He was just singing to fill the silence, to honor a memory. He finished the song, the last note hanging in the quiet air. He sat for a moment, the guitar resting in his lap, a lump in his throat. He looked over at Maverick. The horse hadn't moved, or so Jedediah thought. But then something small, something almost imperceptible happened. Maverick's head, which had been bowed low, slowly lifted. His ears, which had been pinned back, twitched, then swiveled forward, as if trying to catch a faint sound. Jedediah held his breath, his heart thudding against his ribs. He watched, his eyes wide with disbelief, as Maverick took a single tentative step forward, then another. The horse's gaunt frame moved with a slow, hesitant grace, drawn by an unseen force. Jedediah stayed perfectly still, not daring to breathe, afraid to break the spell. Maverick continued to walk, his hooves making soft thuds on the dirt. He stopped at the fence, just a few feet away from Jedediah. And then he did something Jedediah hadn't seen him do in weeks. He looked directly at him. His eyes, those deep, haunted pools, seemed to hold a flicker of something new. Not hope, perhaps, not yet, but something other than despair, something that acknowledged Jedediah's presence. And his song, Jedediah's throat tightened. This was more than he had dared to hope for. He slowly, carefully began to strum the guitar again. The same melody. He sang the song, his voice still rough, but with a new warmth, a new tenderness. He sang about the enduring strength of love, about the echoes of the past that can guide us through the present. He sang it softly, a lullaby for a wounded soul. Maverick listened. His ears remained pricked forward, his gaze fixed on Jedediah. He didn't eat, not yet, but he was no longer just a statue of despair. He was a creature responding, a spirit stirring from a deep slumber. Jedediah continued to play and sing, the music weaving a delicate bridge between them, a shared language of sorrow and the faint, persistent whisper of hope. He knew this was just the beginning, a single thread pulled from the tangled knot of Maverick's trauma. But for the first time in a long time, Jedediah felt a flicker of something akin to hope himself. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, and the stars began to appear, tiny diamonds scattered across the darkening canvas. Jedediah kept playing, his fingers growing more nimble with each passing chord. He sang Sarah's song, her melody, her voice resonating in the quiet of the evening. He sang for Maverick, for the horse's incredible resilience, for the spark that was slowly rekindling within him. He noticed, as he played, that Maverick's head was now lowered, not in despair, but in a posture of listening. The horse stood close to the fence, his large dark eyes reflecting the faint starlight, fixed on Jedediah. As Jedediah transitioned into the song's second verse, the one that spoke of finding solace after loss, a miracle began to unfold. Maverick took another step, then another, until he was standing right at the fence, mere feet from Jedediah. He lowered his head, his velvet nose nudging the rough wood of the fence, as if trying to get closer to the source of the music. Jedediah's heart swelled. He continued to sing, his voice thick with emotion. He saw a subtle shift in Maverick's posture. The horse was still thin, still gaunt, but he was no longer a prisoner of his own misery. He was present. He was listening. Then, as Jedediah reached the chorus, a line about love's enduring melody, guiding us through darkness, Maverick did something truly remarkable. He let out a soft nicker. It was a small sound, barely audible above the strumming of the guitar. But to Jedediah, it was a thunderclap. It was a sound of connection, of recognition, of a spirit reaching out. Jedediah's eyes welled up. He stopped playing for a moment, overwhelmed. He looked at Maverick, and Maverick looked back. In that shared gaze, a silent understanding passed between them. It was a moment of profound peace, a fragile truce with the pain that had defined them both. Jedediah started playing again, his fingers finding the chords with renewed confidence. He sang the last verse, the one that promised dawn after the longest night. He sang it with all his heart, his voice carrying across the darkening ranch. Maverick remained by the fence, his head lowered, listening intently. He didn't move towards the hay, he didn't make a sound, but he was no longer completely withdrawn. The music had reached him, bypassing the layers of fear and pain, touching something deep within his soul. As the final chord faded, Jedediah gently laid the guitar aside. He didn't stand up immediately. He just sat there, a man and a horse, sharing the quiet stillness of the evening. The stars were brighter now, a vast, silent audience to this small, significant miracle. Jedediah looked at Maverick, and Maverick, surprisingly, didn't retreat. He stood his ground, his presence a quiet comfort. Jedediah whispered, "That was for you, Sarah, and for you, Maverick." He then slowly rose, his joints protesting, and walked towards the small pile of hay in Maverick's pen. He picked up a few strands of the sweet-smelling grass, turning them over in his fingers. He walked back to the fence, holding the hay out towards Maverick. He didn't expect him to eat. He just wanted to offer a simple gesture, a continuation of the connection forged by Sarah's song. Maverick watched him, his dark eyes curious. He lowered his head, his long muzzle reaching out tentatively. His soft lips brushed against Jedediah's fingers, a touch so gentle it sent a shiver through the rancher. Then Maverick took a small bite of the hay. He chewed slowly, deliberately, his jaw moving with a newfound purpose. It wasn't much, just a few strands, but it was everything. It was a step back from the precipice, a whisper of a will to survive. Jedediah felt a surge of emotion so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He watched Maverick eat, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his weathered cheek. The music had reached him, Sarah's music. It had reminded Maverick that he was not alone, that even in the deepest darkness there could be a melody of hope. And Jedediah, in turn, had found a way to keep Sarah's light alive, not just in his memories, but in the quiet act of healing another wounded soul. The night was still, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with the gentle sound of a horse finally finding a reason to eat, and a rancher finding a reason to believe again. The journey was far from over, but a path had been cleared, paved with the echoes of a beloved song, and the quiet strength of two broken hearts finding solace in each other. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the sky a brilliant, unblemished blue. The air was alive with the promise of a new day, a stark contrast to the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the past few weeks. Jedediah stepped out of his small farmhouse, the scent of strong coffee filling his nostrils. He pulled on his worn boots, his movements purposeful. His gaze immediately drifted to Maverick's pen. He paused, a breath held tight in his chest, wondering if the fragile connection forged by Sarah's song would hold. He walked towards the pen, his boots crunching on the gravel. As he got closer, he could see movement. Maverick was no longer standing listlessly in the corner. He was pacing a slow, deliberate circuit of his enclosure. His head was up, his ears twitching, taking in the sights and sounds of the waking ranch. It was a small thing, this movement, this awareness, but to Jedediah it was monumental. He saw that the pile of hay, while not significantly depleted, had been disturbed. A few more strands were gone, and beside the water trough, a small amount of fresh oats, which Jedediah had quietly placed there the previous evening, had also been touched. Maverick was eating. Not with gusto, not with abandon, but he was eating. The hunger that had been consuming him was finally beginning to recede, pushed back by the faint, persistent melody of hope. Jedediah leaned against the fence, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. He didn't rush. He didn't try to force anything. He just watched, a silent observer of Maverick's slow, tentative return to life. He saw the fear still flicker in the horse's eyes when a crow cawed too loudly, or when a distant tractor rumbled to life. The scars of his past were deep, and they wouldn't vanish overnight, but the absolute terror, the crushing despair, seemed to have receded. It was replaced by a cautious curiosity, a nascent awareness of his surroundings. He remembered Sarah's words, spoken so many times during their years together on the ranch. Every creature, Jedediah, she'd say, her eyes twinkling, has a song inside them. Sometimes it just gets drowned out by the noise. He looked at Maverick and he saw a horse slowly, painstakingly, finding his own song again. It was a different song than the one he'd sung before his abuse, perhaps a quieter, more poignant melody, but it was still his, and Jedediah was committed to helping him find its tune. He decided to bring Sarah's guitar out again. He sat on his usual spot by the fence, the familiar weight of the instrument settling on his lap. He didn't sing immediately. He just let the silence settle around them, a comfortable quiet punctuated by Maverick's soft movements. Then he began to strum, softly at first, a gentle prelude. He watched Maverick. The horse paused his pacing, his ears swiveling towards the sound. He didn't approach the fence this time, but he didn't shy away either. He simply stood, a study in equine contemplation, listening. Jedediah began to sing, not Sarah's song this time, but another one she'd loved, a tune about resilience, about finding strength in unexpected places. His voice was still rough, but it was steadier now, more confident. He poured his gratitude into the melody, his appreciation for this small, hard-won victory. He sang about the quiet persistence of nature, about how even the most trampled flower could find a way to bloom again. As he sang, he noticed Maverick slowly begin to graze on the small patches of grass within his pen. It was a far cry from the mountains of hay he should have been eating, but it was consistent, steady progress. Each blade of grass was a tiny act of defiance against the emptiness that had threatened to swallow him whole. Days turned into weeks. Jedediah continued his routine. Every morning, he'd check on Maverick, offer a quiet word, and then bring out Sarah's guitar. He'd play and sing, sometimes Sarah's favorite ballad, sometimes other tunes she'd loved. He found that the music wasn't just for Maverick, it was for him too. It was a way to keep Sarah's memory alive, to feel her presence on the ranch, to combat the crushing loneliness that had settled over him like a shroud. He learned that Jedediah's voice, though untrained, held a raw, honest emotion that resonated. It wasn't about performance, it was about connection. And Maverick, the abused horse who had refused to eat, was responding. He began to eat more regularly, though still cautiously. His ribs started to fill out, his coat regained a hint of its natural sheen. He still carried the weight of his past, his movements sometimes hesitant, his eyes still holding a depth of sadness. But the absolute terror had faded. He would approach the fence when Jedediah started playing, no longer needing to be drawn by the hay. He would stand and listen, his ears swiveling, his large body relaxed, a stark contrast to the rigid tension that had once defined him. He even started to respond to Jedediah's voice, not with words, but with a soft nicker, a flick of his ears, a gentle nudge of his nose against the fence. One afternoon, a group of potential buyers arrived at the ranch. Jedediah had been hesitant to sell Maverick, wanting to see him fully recover, but the bills were piling up, and a rancher's life was a constant balancing act between passion and practicality. The buyers were experienced horsemen, their eyes sharp and assessing as they surveyed the ranch's stock. When they came to Maverick's pen, they saw a horse that was still recovering, a horse that bore the visible marks of past abuse. "He's looking a little rough," one of them commented, his tone dismissive. "Been through a lot, has he?" Jedediah nodded, his jaw tight. "He has, but he's coming along." As if on cue, Jedediah felt a familiar urge. He walked to his usual spot by the fence, picked up Sarah's guitar, and began to play. He started with the old ballad, the song of love and loss and enduring hope. The buyers paused, their attention caught by the unexpected music. They watched as Jedediah sang, his rough voice filling the air. They saw Maverick, who had been standing near the back of the pen, slowly turn and walk towards the fence. His ears pricked forward. He stopped directly in front of Jedediah, his dark eyes fixed on the rancher. He nudged the fence gently, a familiar gesture. The buyers exchanged surprised glances. They had seen many horses, seen their quirks and their reactions, but this was something different. This was a connection, a bond forged in the unlikely crucible of music and shared vulnerability. When Jedediah finished the song, Maverick let out a soft nicker. One of the buyers, a man named Silas, stepped closer to the fence. "Remarkable," he murmured, his earlier dismissiveness gone. "I've never seen a horse respond like that to music, especially a horse that's been through so much." Jedediah simply nodded, a small proud smile touching his lips. "He has his own song," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "and he's learning to sing it again." Silas watched Maverick for another moment, then turned to Jedediah. "How much are you asking for him?" he asked, his tone respectful. Jedediah named a price. It was fair, reflecting the horse's potential, but also acknowledging the work that still needed to be done. Silas didn't haggle. He simply nodded. "He's yours," he said, extending his hand. "We'll make the arrangements." As the buyers drove away, Jedediah watched them go, a mix of relief and a pang of sadness in his chest. He had found Maverick a good home, a place where he would be understood and cared for, but he would miss the quiet mornings, the shared songs, the slow, steady progress of a wounded soul finding its way back. He walked over to Maverick, who was now placidly grazing near the fence. "You did good, boy," Jedediah murmured, running a hand down Maverick's strong neck. "You sure did good." Maverick turned his head, nudging Jedediah's hand with his nose. It was a gesture of trust, of acknowledgement, of a connection that had been built one song at a time. Jedediah felt a profound sense of peace. He had been unable to save Sarah, but he had saved Maverick. He had honored Sarah's memory by giving life and hope back to another creature. He sat down by the fence, and Maverick settled down nearby, his head resting comfortably on the ground. Jedediah picked up Sarah's guitar. He didn't play a sad song or a song of loss. He played a lively, upbeat tune, one that Sarah used to hum while she danced around the kitchen. He played for the future, for the healing that had begun, for the quiet miracle that had unfolded on his ranch. He thought about Sarah, her infectious joy, her unwavering kindness. He knew she would have loved Maverick. She would have seen the spark in his eyes, the resilience in his spirit, and she would have sung to him too. Jedediah smiled, the sound of the guitar and the contented presence of the horse filling the quiet afternoon. The wind still blew across the plains, but it no longer sounded like a mournful sigh. It sounded like a song of healing, of hope, and of the enduring power of a melody played with love. He knew that Maverick's journey was far from over, but he had given him a vital gift, the reminder that even after the deepest darkness, the music can always find you, and the dawn will always come. The sale was finalized. Maverick was loaded onto a trailer, his new owner Silas, ensuring he was comfortable and secure. As the trailer pulled away, Jedediah stood by the fence, a solitary figure against the vast Montana sky. He watched until the dust settled, a sense of quiet accomplishment warming him. He hadn't just sold a horse, he had witnessed a transformation. He had seen a creature broken by cruelty slowly, painstakingly, put himself back together, guided by the most unexpected of healers, a song. He walked back to his small farmhouse, the silence of the ranch no longer feeling empty but peaceful. He put Sarah's guitar back in its usual place, leaning against the wall. He knew he would play it again, perhaps not as often, but the music would always be there, a reminder of Sarah, of Maverick, and of the profound connection that can exist between beings, even across the vast distances of species and suffering. The next few weeks were quiet. Jedediah went about his ranch duties, the rhythm of his days re-established, but with a subtle shift. He found himself looking at the other animals with a renewed sense of empathy. He listened more closely to the sounds of the ranch, appreciating the small moments of peace and connection. He'd occasionally find himself humming Sarah's tunes, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, a familiar truck rumbled up the long driveway. Jedediah stepped out onto the porch, his brow furrowed in curiosity. As the driver's door opened, his eyes widened. It was Silas, his buyer, and beside him, looking healthy, his coat gleaming, his eyes bright and alert, was Maverick. Jedediah's heart gave a jolt. He walked down the steps, a question forming on his lips, but Silas spoke first. "Jedediah," he said, his voice warm and respectful. "We owe you an apology and a thank you." He gestured towards Maverick, who stood calmly in his trailer, looking remarkably content. We didn't realize the extent of his healing. He's a changed horse. Still has his moments, of course, needs a gentle hand, but the fear, it's almost gone. He's eating like a champion, strong and healthy. He's even started responding to training with a willingness we never thought possible. Silas paused, looking directly at Jedediah. "But the real reason I'm here," he continued, his voice softening, "is about the music. We tried playing some music for him, thought maybe it would help him settle, and he just stood there, listening, completely calm. It was like he was waiting for it. We even found that old recording you made playing Sarah's song. He perks right up. It's like that music is a part of him now." Silas shook his head in amazement. "We tried to understand how you did it, how you reached him when no one else could. You told us it was a song. We didn't quite believe it, not until we saw it for ourselves." He looked back at Maverick. "He still gets a little spooked by loud noises, but when he hears that music, it's like you said, he remembers his song, and it makes him feel safe." Jedediah felt a warmth spread through him, a profound sense of fulfillment. He had been unable to save Sarah, but he had saved Maverick. He had honored Sarah's memory by giving life and hope back to another creature. "Sarah always said music could heal anything," Jedediah said softly, his gaze meeting Maverick's intelligent eyes. "She had a way of finding the song in everything, even in the silence." Silas nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So, you're saying—" "I'm saying," Jedediah finished, his voice firm, "that Maverick belongs with you. He's found his home, and he's found his music. That's all I ever wanted for him." He looked at Maverick, a silent promise passing between them. "You take care of him, Silas, and make sure you play him that song now and then. It's important." Silas beamed. "We will, Jedediah. We absolutely will. Thank you. Thank you for giving us such a remarkable horse." As Silas prepared to load Maverick back into the trailer, Jedediah reached out and gently stroked the horse's powerful neck. "You keep singing your song, Maverick," he whispered. "You keep singing." Maverick whinnied softly, a sound of contentment, not fear. Jedediah watched as the trailer pulled away once more, this time with a feeling of certainty and closure. He had done right by the horse, and he had honored Sarah's memory in the most beautiful way he could. He walked back to his porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the land. He knew that life would go on, with its joys and its sorrows, its challenges and its quiet triumphs. But he also knew that some melodies, once heard, never truly fade away. They linger, they heal, and they remind us that even in the face of unimaginable pain, the song of hope can always be found. And sometimes all it takes is a ranchar, a guitar, and a song from a lost love to help a broken creature find its voice again. Jedediah sat on his porch swing, the familiar creak of the chains a comforting sound in the evening stillness. The sky was ablaze with colour, a fiery spectacle that signalled the end of another day. He thought about Maverick, safe and loved in his new home, the music playing a vital role in his continued recovery. It was a testament to the power of kindness, of patience, and of the universal language of music. He realized that his own journey of healing was also tied to Sarah's music. It had been the bridge that carried him back from the edge of despair, the melody that had reminded him of joy and connection when he thought they were lost forever. He picked up Sarah's guitar, its familiar weight grounding him. He didn't need to play a specific song, not today. He simply strummed a few chords, letting the notes drift into the twilight. He understood now that grief wasn't something to be conquered or erased, but something to be carried, to be understood, and eventually to be integrated into the fabric of one's life. Sarah's memory, like her music, wasn't a source of pain, but a source of strength, a gentle echo that guided him forward. He looked out at the vast expanse of his ranch, the land he had loved and worked for so many years. It was quiet now, the day's labour done, but it was a contented quiet, a peaceful stillness. He knew he would continue to live here, tending to his land, caring for his animals, and keeping Sarah's memory alive, not just in his heart, but in the simple, honest melodies he played on her guitar. He thought about the unexpected lessons he had learned from Maverick. The horse's journey had mirrored his own in many ways. A struggle with past trauma, a gradual reawakening of spirit, a reliance on comfort and connection to find a path forward. They had both, in their own ways, been saved by a song. A gentle breeze rustled through the nearby cottonwood trees, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Jedediah closed his eyes, a sense of profound gratitude washing over him. He had lost much, but he had also found much. He had found a way to keep Sarah's light shining, and he had helped a lost soul find his way back. He opened his eyes and looked up at the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They seemed to twinkle with a special brilliance tonight, as if acknowledging the quiet miracle that had unfolded on this small patch of Montana earth. He knew that life's song was complex, with its soaring highs and its melancholic lows, but it was always worth listening to, always worth playing. And as he sat there, the guitar resting on his lap, Jedediah felt a deep sense of peace. He was ready to face whatever came next, his heart a little lighter, his spirit a little stronger, guided by the enduring melody of love and the quiet power of a song. He smiled, a genuine heartfelt smile, and began to play a simple, hopeful tune, his own song, finally finding its voice. Jedediah watched, his heart in his throat. Maverick! The horse who had refused all sustenance took a hesitant step. Then another. Drawn by an invisible thread, the horse moved towards the fence, his haunted eyes fixed on Jedediah, a silent plea in their depths. Sarah's song had saved Maverick, bridging the chasm of his abuse with a melody of hope. Like Maverick, we all have our songs. What's yours? Share your story in the comments below and subscribe for more tales of resilience.